Okay, so welcome everybody to the next Pacific Basin Economic Council webinar session. And in a moment, I'll be introducing our guest speaker, David Piesse from Guardtime. But before I do, I just wanted to mention that this particular webinar today is going to be focused on the transforming of supply chains using blockchain in particular. But we're going to be covering quite a number of subjects within that sphere with David, who's for me anyway, in my ability, which is not very much in this sector, David is the ultimate expert, especially here in Asia, on all things that are to do with AI and blockchain. And he's really at the coalface, if you like, of all that's happening in the region. Very exciting, which I'm really pleased that we could spare David's time today to present to the PBEC members and our wider distribution audience. So welcome everybody who are joining us. And I'd like to firstly just talk about our guest speaker before we bring him to present today. So David is a global insurance evangelist and advisory board member of Guardtime, which is a cybersecurity firm specializing in data-centric security, and is the founder of data integrity standard keyless signature infrastructure, otherwise known as KSI. His specialities are really in the areas of cyber risk, enterprise risk management, blockchain, dynamic financial analysis, catastrophic modeling, microinsurance, AI, and disruptive technologies. And typically he goes around representing Guardtime from the business perspective on cyber liability, enterprise risk management, and correlation of cyber risk to catastrophic and financial risks for embedding the KSI into the insurance industry. This includes establishing blockchain technology. And we actually first met back in 2016 here in Hong Kong, where he was presenting one of the examples of the insurance blockchain adoption for a shipping client in Maersk. And this was the first global commercial marine insurance blockchain platform to optimize and transform the sector. This platform, called InsureWave, is a commercial entity, and he is on the global production team. And then moving all the way to present day, which David will go into in a little bit more detail in his presentation today. But I'm really excited to hear more about his new venture called Crew Assist, which is along the lines of providing seafarers and workers an immunity passport based on the blockchain to facilitate travel passage cross-border during this COVID and COVID recovery periods. So without further ado, specializing in the insurance sector, David comes from the industry starting at Lloyd's of London and Edward Lumley Insurance Brokers, combining insurance, IT, and risk management for over 35 years of a career, and has worked predominantly in all financial sectors, and as I said before, is a specialist here in Asia. In 2017, he received the Kenneth Black Jr. Distinguished Service Award from the International Insurance Society. So welcome, David, this morning. It's a nice sunny morning here in Hong Kong, but as you know, this particular time, we're back in a bit of a semi-lockdown mode, it feels again, with all the latest restrictions.
Yes. I'm at home. I'm not in the office, so yes, we are back to that, but we're not totally locked down. So anyway, great. Thank you for the introduction, Mike.
No problem. And I'm going to just bring up your presentation now, and when I do so, hopefully you can see the presentation, slide 1, and I'm going to drop off my video so I can allow David to start his presentation. And then what we'll do as a means of interacting with David, as this is going out as a pre-recorded piece today, you will be able to contact David on the end slide. We'll have his contact details, or you can contact me directly at PBEC to get in touch. But this presentation will be uploaded as well to our website and provided in our December e-news digest as well. So thanks for everybody. This is going to be a fantastic presentation. I'm looking forward to it. Over to you, David. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good morning, afternoon, everybody, wherever you are. This I'm very, very pleased to be part of this webinar series with the PBEC. This particular topic is a very big topic, of course. You can't do it justice in half an hour, but I will specialize in this particular subject of blockchain in this particular webinar. So if I have the next slide, please. As Mike said, I represent Guardtime. I have done since 2010. The significant issue about Guardtime is that it was founded in 2007 in Estonia because of a state-sponsored cyber attack on the country, which closed it down. And that enabled Estonia between 2007 and 2010 to develop a digital society of a nation of 1.3 million people, but a scalable digital society where data was the focus. Obviously, you have to protect your perimeter, you have to protect the encryption of your data for confidentiality, but also the data integrity itself, which now moving forward is a major part of GDPR and privacy laws. So this is about security by design and confidentiality, preservation by design of data. And this is the whole underpinning of our supply chain approach and how the industries need to work. Because if you don't secure data and you don't have data accuracy, you will be attacked, you will get the wrong things, and a lot of fake supply chain, counterfeit medicines, counterfeit goods will appear, which will be very dangerous for us in logistics and other kind of things. So that's the Guardtime background in Estonia, and KSI, which stands for Keyless Signature Infrastructure, is the technology that protects the whole supply chain approach from one end of the chain to the other. So we can now flip on to the next slide. So this was already underway when before the pandemic came along. We had the defense industry, the military industry, were all using blockchain for supply chain, because when it comes to the security of the realm, you can't have gaps like this. So the defense industry was far ahead, quickly followed by the telecommunication industry, and then followed by the healthcare industry. So this is in production. This is not theory or something for the future. Obviously, it's been accelerated by the pandemic, and as we can see, I called it the COVID effect. But this COVID effect really, I think, has brought forward quite a bit of what was already happening by 5 years, maybe even 5 years, because new investments are now happening for parallel supply chains. The supply chains that didn't perform may be done locally now. They may be used robotics and 3D printing. And China, a lot of China's supply chain is moving to ASEAN, like Vietnam, for example. And so we're seeing a reshoring effect as well. And all of this is about diversification and also simplifying, having more stumpy supply chains maybe, so that we can manage the risk and provide visibility to everyone on that chain at the same time. So upstream and downstream, and then we can start to do exciting new things. So this is the COVID effect. And on the next slide, we show what COVID has done, really. So I've shared this slide from Swiss Re. Swiss Re have a report out called, if anyone would like to download it, called De-risking the Supply Chain. It's called the SIGMA, S-I-G-M-A series, and it's a very good document. And I got this diagram from that report after I did a presentation with Swiss Re on this a few weeks ago. But what Swiss Re is showing here is that a lot of the drivers that we're all familiar with, cost arbitrage of labor, geopolitical risks of trade, ESG, the climate change, business interruption caused by natural catastrophes, caused by now pandemic, and by new emerging technology that comes in. So I think that public-private partnerships will step in. We'll see more interaction between government and private industry to address some of these things. But all these drivers were happening for the last few years. And now, of course, with the COVID, we see this adjustment to the supply chain, which I think will move pretty quickly. I think the Swiss report said there's $1 trillion of investment going into revamping the supply chain now. So that will be a significant change. So a big change, in fact. So I think we will see that coming. If we go to the next slide, these are the challenges that most people get when they are looking at digitizing their supply chain. But it's based on the problems that occur. So most people have legacy systems, and legacy systems are, the ERP systems that they've had in place for many, many years, logistical systems, and they've served the companies well. But now, because of these trends and everything else, we need to look at how we can create an end-to-end supply chain where everything is visible. We see all the data from start to finish. We know what has happened in that supply chain. This would be, for example, like on the vaccines that are coming in, they need to be stored at a low temperature. We need to know if they have not been stored at a low temperature and get an accurate record of that from right the way through the supply chain, so that people aren't injected with something that has been heated up, which can be very serious. So, but we're not looking to remove the current legacy system. We are interacting with that legacy system because blockchain is the technology that we're discussing here. And the key thing about blockchain is protecting the data layer, the integrity and identity of data, and interoperability with other systems. So there's no rip and replace going on here. This is an integration process so that we can join everything together. And then when we get visibility across the supply chain, which is what the logistics companies like DHL and others want to see, we'll be able to see upstream what is going on in the supply chain, downstream what is going on. We'll be able to see product recalls when they happen and not have to wait. There are many, many use cases from this, but most importantly, we'll be able to see data evidence of what has happened in our supply chain, independently of everyone working in that supply chain. And that is evidence that will stand up in court if there was ever a challenge, but it will give us the truth to a third party, whoever that third party is, to tell us what went on. So I think that is absolutely key, and that will get us trust in the network. So the most difficult thing in implementing a digitized supply chain environment is getting the trust of people to come on board and maybe share data with people that could be their competitors, or could be someone that they don't want to talk to. But of course, that's because data in traditional systems gets moved. So we're talking here about keeping data where it belongs and just sharing that data with permission. So to get trust. So I wouldn't give someone my passport because it's my identity, but if I give them permission to look at it and it stays with me, then I'm okay with that. So this is about getting people on board. I don't think you can get everyone on board straight away. As you'll see from the seafarers, we have observers and we have active participants. The observers see what is going on, and then they come in when they are comfortable with it. So it's a slower process to onboard, but we're seeing this onboarding speed up. And once people like the Maersk system that Mike mentioned, once everyone got on board and they started to see how they could transact more efficiently, we now have quite a few new players in that ecosystem. So it's about data, it's about efficiency, and it's about protection against fraud and counterfeit. And for anyone that's been involved in the PPE business lately, everyone will know there's been fraudulent products, fraudulent people, all sorts of problems. We certainly don't want that to happen again. If there's another pandemic or another catastrophe, we want to be ready, and we want to avoid all the problems that we've had in the last few months. And of course, certifications and compliance, this brings the regulation in real time. So when we have regulation in real time, we save cost, and these trusted reports are available to regulators, and of course the customers will get a much better delivery service. So this is the challenges, and I'll now talk about the next slide how we go on to address them. First of all, I briefly need to talk about digital and physical twins, because maybe some people don't know about this, but the concept of if you're digitizing, you've got to have something physical that you're digitizing. You don't have something digital without something physical. And similarly, when you're digitized, when you're checking and verifying things, you want to make sure that your physical and your digital assets match. Otherwise, if they don't, there's something wrong, and there may have been tampering and such like. So digital twin is used in manufacturing now. It's used for real-time components, 3D printing, sensors, cameras, as such like. In this discussion, I'm going to talk about a digital twin as a physical twin, as maybe the physical part being a barcode reader, could be a QR code, and then the technology that comes, the KSI technology from Estonia, gets embedded inside that physical twin, and then we verify that they're both in sync without storing any sensitive data at all. It's all done on cryptography, hash keys, and then we write that to the blockchain, and then that's immutable for life, and we'll be able to tell what happened in real time, the truth. So this digital and physical twin is the basis of how we secure our supply chains. Next slide, please. So also, I think the other thing that we need to know about before we just run through this is that the internet, we see Vint Cerf there and Berners-Lee, two great guys. They're getting their awards. Who invented the internet? Vint invented the network, and Berners-Lee the World Wide Web. But as they will admit, they invented the internet for academics. So they didn't actually spend any time on the Department of Defense in America. Vint didn't spend a lot of time delivering a security layer in the internet, because it wasn't intended to be used the way it is today, which went crazy into commerce. So now we have an internet which has got a security weakness. And this is why we're having cyber attacks and things like this. So we need to close that gap. So we need to get the internet to tell the truth. And we need to wrap the internet with technology that enables it to be accountable and attributable. And that's exactly what Estonia did after they were attacked. They wrapped the such as this KSI that I'm discussing, and without moving their data, and they could prove at any time that any of that data had not been tampered with by using cryptography. So we get in the supply chain world, the old supply chain is trust on every stage, and then the new supply chain, where we're using the technology, the blockchain here, is trust but verify, which is a military mantra, but it's exactly what it is. So when you just have trust and you're not measuring it, it is very difficult to do provable security. But when you have verification and you can measure, the trust moves to truth, and then truth becomes a factor for verification that your supply chain is intact. You get better insurance, you get better risk management, etc., all the way through. So these are the two basics: the digital twin and the trust but verify on data. And now I'll explain a little bit more. Next slide, please. So how are we going to address digitizing the supply chain or increasing the interaction with current systems? First of all, we need to be scalable. It's no good having technology that won't scale across large cross borders like China or ASEAN. So the digital technology that we're discussing here is massively scalable. It's already been scaled in the defense industry and across large supply chains. As I said, it needs to integrate with existing systems and provide this visibility from one end another of the supply chain. And that's all the third parties, producers, distributors, consumers, everybody. And we'll be able to have that visibility. And then the next slide, we we move to a more secure communication and bring in the Internet of Things, sensors, all these devices. This is particularly important as the ports, if we talk shipping, the ports are now, people don't, there's smart devices all across the port. People monitor it from an office. So we need to be able to look at that to that level, to that data, and be able to put in anti-counterfeit measures for fraud. So this is the with the existing systems. So you just go on to the next slide. So this is what we're going to do, and what we do is we prove that suppliers and distributors are reporting the truth, and that we're in compliance in real time to regulation. And there are many, and that we've eliminated as much or mitigated as much counterfeit goods and data that we can, and that we haven't had a cyber attack compromisation there thing. And then we will we will move to this a better world of trust and through automation, and we'll be able to track and trace globally through the supply chain at item level. And if we need verifiable proof and accountability, we go to this independent source of data, and then it can be examined by an insurance industry, a regulator, a court, or by anyone that the company wishes to appoint. So a better experience all round. The next slide. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm just explaining here the independence of this, that when you have a lot of systems, repositories, networks, you don't have to to verify that things work. You don't have to go to all the people involved. This can be independently verified automatically by mathematics without having to go to human intervention. So this is a true liability investigation, if required, to help us understand if anything has been tampered with. So it's a very simple concept. Any data that's valuable, we call it crown jewel data, if you like, is actually given a hash key, which tells it, which is all standardized and everything else, which tells you when it was signed, who handled the data, and most importantly, has it been tampered with? And that technology for the supply chain is then put inside a docket, and this is a digital physical twin docket, and this docket moves from one stage to another in the supply chain, and it won't go on to the next phase until we have validation that nothing has been tampered with in that stage. So this is how the technology is embedded in supply chain process. So next slide. So customs and excise is a very good example as part of the supply chain here, as a use case, because they rely on representations of the import of the records. There's a lot of paperwork here. We need to reduce some of this paperwork, and due to low levels of security, sometimes it's very difficult to track the trade and supply chains. They can be costly, and we need to make sure we have a bit more trust here.
And David, David, I would like to ask a question on this particular slide because of interest to myself, coming from an aviation background. You've hit the nail on the head with, in particular, immigration, in contrast, has virtually gone digital in the last 24 months at most major airports, where, especially like Changi and Hong Kong Airport in particular, there's literally a no human interface anymore, a touchless experience. But then you reach the customs and excise part, and there's still that either a piece of paper that you've had to fill out on the plane to explain that you haven't got anything that you're not supposed to have, and you have to hand that in still. So where are we? You know, we have the technology which you're explaining today, but where are we in terms of Asia in implementation?
Yeah, I think this is starting to come in through the digitized trade platforms that are now, which I will mention briefly before the end here, which are coming in, where the customs and excise have to be part of that national trade platform. If they're not, then you know, it's not going to work properly. So I think the national trade platforms are speeding it up. But right now, yes, it's a slower part of the supply chain link. The company that in Switzerland that does the health pass for the seafarers is called SICPA, SICPA. They're specialists in the customs and excise world, and one of their whole mantras is to get this technology into the customs and excise world.
And would that cover airway bills as well? Would that be also going? I mean, obviously the big integrators already are paperless, but when we come to the smaller providers, the SMEs in the freight industry in particular, freight forwarders, there's still this sort of reluctance in some way to go paperless.
Yeah, so the SME is obviously a very big target for this technology, because they're not, you know, they haven't had the abilities to get onto this kind of environment. The cost has been prohibited and things like this, and the insurance on the back of it and everything else. So we're basically addressing the SME, and in the trade platforms, so like in China, the banks have not been servicing the SMEs either. So that's created a very big trade protection gap because of that reason. So I think we're now going to address a lot of these SME issues, and I think SME is going to be accelerated by this. And of course, when we add this tamper-proof approach, we now have these ticks in the box that go from one phase to another. We've got a better system. And of course, with COVID, where people passing through airports and passing on seafarers getting off ships, this process of verification of trusted data, that people haven't bought a COVID test on the corner of the street. They haven't given a doctor $100 to give them a negative test. All of this now has to be in a what we call data provenance, and data provenance means you know exactly the life cycle of a piece of data from the time it was created to the time that it is archived, if you like. So it's knowing the trail from end to end, a single version of the truth, right the way through your chain. Of course, data accuracy is up to the user. Blockchain's not going to solve a piece of data that is not accurate, that's been put in there in the first place. So we have to have good controls around data accuracy, and then the system will take care of that whole provenance from then on. So this is the trusted provenance world. And one of the things that I'm working on here with the Hong Kong supply chain associations is something, Mike, as you know, an aviation threat, which is lithium batteries. And right now, the battery manufacturer, the electronic manufacturers, the customs and excise, the logistics onto the plane don't have blockchain to work with. That's something that is underway, but it does mean that if a counterfeit battery was to get in, or a recycled battery that didn't have a digital or a physical twin, so if a recycled battery got in and we didn't have a digital twin on it, we wouldn't allow it in the system. So we're looking here at how can we streamline, so when the captain of the plane swipes his phone against the device for his cargo, he will have an idea of the provenance. He would know that DHL brought it. He would know that the customs approved it. He would know that the battery manufacturer was in Japan, was Panasonic, and he would have that information, and it will give him much more confidence on the cargo. So this is a real supply chain for this.
Yeah, I think anything to do with enhancing the safety element in terms of, you know, verification and coming back to the trust of what is your cargo, but also you could even go further and also on the maintenance side as well, where there's obviously been proven instances of misappropriation of signing off on things in the old paper form that have then been discovered in a pre-accident investigation. So I do think you mentioned it before in other presentations about, you know, automobile, and we don't want to go off subject here, but I think it's important to realize just how crucial these new technologies are in verifying and trusting the results. And so to prevent accidents is a big selling point as well, I think needs to get across to all of this.
Yeah, and for autonomous transport, yes, for semi-autonomous cars, ships, planes, all of this, it's absolutely crucial with all these sensors that this independent data trail is created that doesn't actually store actual data, but it stores what has happened in cryptographic form that can be then displayed in a fashion that can be read. So yes, absolutely agree. So yes, and then of course, getting towards a wrap up here, this is going to have a lot of benefits right across trade finance. It's going to help, as you mentioned, Mike, the bill of ladings and all of these that are, you know, not electronic, some of them at the moment, or they're not very good electronic form. This will help the asset owners have much more visibility, lower the costs. The corporates will be able to share more accurate risk data. We bring in the SME, the ports get the single custom window, which is what Singapore is doing, of course, with its trade platform. And, you know, to interact with other trade platforms. And we get a much better insurance experience, which I'll briefly mention. And we de-risk the buy-sell process, the letter of credit, the buy-sell with the banks, and we'll get a faster cross-border reaction. So this is going to benefit the whole trade finance process. And so, and of course, there is a very big trade finance gap here. especially with China and getting the, the people have pulled out of China. The banks have not been, addressing the SME market as we discussed. So this will be a very big factor for the banking world to get a safer supply chain. The loans will be more, they'll be happier to make more loans to the small, medium-sized distributors and suppliers, and be able to look at the compliance and risk. So the supply chain feeding all the global trade will be much more improved. And just to show that there's a lot going on now, China has quite a few trade platforms. Singapore has one. Everyone is at it, developing some kind of trade platform using blockchain technology. This proves the point. There's not going to be one blockchain in the world. There's not going to be one ecosystem in the world. There's going to be hundreds, and the need to make sure that the interoperability and the data is kept intact as these systems trade with each other.
David, are you able to touch upon, because you mentioned China here has 4 already. Now, President Xi's obviously been talking about the dual circulation, and I was just wondering, how does that work then if you're an international company, cross-border trade in and out of China on a blockchain, you're operating a system? I mean, do you have any recommendations for that? Is there any sort of guidance for that yet coming through?
Yeah, well, I think it's all about the data and the cybersecurity laws, right? China doesn't like any data to leave China. So if you're trading across border, if that data gets moved, then there's serious trouble. So I think one has to assume that all data in China is sensitive and keep it in China. So the concept of what we discussed earlier, where like in Estonia, where all the data is kept where it belongs, and the cryptography on that data is metadata that can be shared, right? And that can be shared. So you as long as you obey the rules, and the GDPR rules are coming into Greater Bay. Yeah. So I think we're going to see fines and things like this soon. So the most important part, that this must be GDPR compliant, it must be data privacy law compliant, and and Asia is starting to get those GDPR laws coming in now, whereas before they were just concerned on privacy. Now they're concerned on breach. So definitely it's about that.
And just before we just move on to the other area quickly, just before we finish, I'd love to know if with these, as you say, multiple blockchains, not just one blockchain, will these integrate then with other sort of what we call digital finance trade platforms? So there'll be like a crossover between the logistics side and the data of the shipment, if you like, for a better term, with the payment side as well.
That's right. So probably the most important new asset to come out of these exponential technologies is the open API, right? The ability to have a programming interface to go to something else. And these APIs are often smart contracts, and these smart contracts will integrate with other systems. So this is the blockchain is not about turning the world on its head, in my opinion. It's not about just having a load of ledgers, in my opinion. It's about the data layer, the protection of the data layer, and the ability to interoperate with standards, third-party data standards, any other system that comes along. So all of these systems have an open API, which will
open resource,
resource to talk to other things. Yes.
So it becomes like a data ecosystem.
It is exactly what it is. Yes, it's the ecosystem itself can obviously interact with other ecosystems. Yes. Yeah. So the world is moving to ecosystems. I think no one's denying that. Yeah.
This is a fascinating slide now, so I'd love you to explain this now.
Yeah, so when in the supply chain, when you have orders and you have POs and everything else, we need to put this digital twin into action, right? So we're seeing a a physical record here with a barcode. There is that's the physical part. We have the digital part where the cryptographic seal I explained earlier is now linked. The digital part is linked with that, and you'll see that down in red, it's saying the signature verification failed. So that means that something is not quite right here, and that we have to investigate and see what happened here before we move on to the next phase in this supply chain. So every phase has a docket, has a and can be signatures from people signing off, right? Digital signatures, such like. So it's really a way of tracking all the way through from the beginning right to the end of what has gone on here, and without any physical data or privacy being breached.
I mean, it's quite detailed. Yeah. I mean, it's got everything you would kind of need to do an investigation.
Well, you can have it for seafarers in the health pass. We store the identity of the seafarer, the hospital that is allowed to do it, and the result of the test, right? And now that's all that's held inside the QR code. And then it's sealed cryptographically, and we don't store that identity inside the blockchain. It stays with the patient, or it stays with the lab, the medical lab that's authorized. They've asked us now if we'll put temperature in there, so we can add temperature into the very quickly. So
Wow.
you store what the right data. Yeah.
And then this next slide shows obviously
well
the footprint.
This is yeah. So this is
fingerprint.
Yeah. So if you think about let's use a plane or a ship, right? A ship operates from a satellite down to the ship. The ship goes to digitized ports. The port interacts with logistics and then interacts with planes. So we have a lot of this is now in the cloud. So we need to be able to know what's going on here in real time. So not everyone doesn't have to keep taking look at this data all the time, but if something happens, it needs to be available. So in cybersecurity, there is penetration testing, which is a bit like a COVID test. You have a COVID test in the morning and you're negative. You may be positive in the afternoon. This is a kind of, it's not necessarily 100% certain. So when you have a penetration test in a system of this magnitude, you may be all right, and then something may have happened. So what this is doing is taking a snapshot in real time of all the relevant data and depositing it into a blockchain with the cryptography. Should something go wrong on data breach, then the blockchain is made available to anyone that the company wants to see, and they'll be able to see what had happened. And it's pulled out like this in a kind of flow chart, but it can be pulled out in different kinds of form. But this is not coming from real data. This is formed from a cryptographic blockchain, which is explaining as evidence what occurred in that particular time. So it's a way of getting real time provenance. And not really wanting to spend too much time on this, but I think the important thing here is to just say that the technology is scalable. It works in a small country, and it'll work in a large country, and it'll work across borders. No data is stored here. That's very important. You can't, like the seafarers example, we can't have anyone having access to the data. Only the people that own the data have the data. So it should stay with the patient wherever they go. The technology is all accredited in the cloud. for standards and everything else, and it's future-proofed. When quantum computer comes in, because of the volume of data so big, we're going to need to go to parallel computing, maybe 10 years' time. No one knows the real time limit of that, but basically,
what is parallel computing? Excuse my ignorance.
Well, it's having to crunch the amount of data that's being generated, right? You need to be able to crunch the data in parallel by several computers. They're supercomputers. And these are so powerful and so fast that the current cryptography that we work with, like the encryption, doesn't actually work anymore. So we need to future-proof to make sure that when quantum computing comes in, we actually can still have confidential data.
And what do you think? I mean, I know you haven't got the crystal ball of every scenario, but what do you think it will take in order to suit the supercomputer?
Well, it's moving the data from the public key, private key, which is a digital key, right, infrastructure, to this like KSI that we've discussed here, which is a hashed data, which is not a key. So you're not relying on physical keys anymore. You're relying on a hash key, and that will be enough to support the quantum computer.
Got it. Okay, perfect.
And provenance, we mentioned already about the provenance of the data. Obviously, it's no good having a new system if it doesn't perform very well. And I always say that if it's been tested in the military, that's good enough for commercial operations. So the Estonian government started this in 2008. So I think we, pretty comfortable that this is the cybersecurity foundation for many industry. And then you build other layers on top, right? Like we're doing this health pass, and we have the cybersecurity, and then there's many passes coming out now for vaccines and everything, and they can all interoperate and sit on top as long as they have that strong cybersecurity foundation. And trust is a major part of this, right? So we're enabling trust without people actually moving data or having to see each other even, and that's going to be an important factor of onboarding. And we're not throwing out legacy; we let it die naturally. So you integrate with it, and when its time is over, it disappears.
Yeah.
And of course, this is about identity of people, identity of data, and devices. It's not just about identity of an individual. It's identity of all three together: your mobile phone with the data that's on it and yourself. And that's the trusted identity. And just to finish here, this is the seafarers. This is the health pass. So our physical thing is the passport. We have a digital equivalent, which can be verified. It's on a QR code, which is the physical part of the twin. We embed the hash key with the name, the information, as you see there, into the QR code. And then there is a universal verifier, which can be anywhere. It could be in an airport, it could be in a store, it could be in a sports arena, where we can verify that identity of the person. In this case, a COVID test, it could be a vaccination has been done. And that will enable us to verify that person is who they say they are, and they're actually, they've had a test, for example. And when they have another test, the other one is revoked in the blockchain, and you can't reverse it. So you will see revoke, positive, negative, if we're talking COVID, but we're also about vaccination, which is going to replace the yellow fever. There's some of these systems are going to be the equivalent of the yellow fever card now in digital form that will allow us to all start traveling again and planes to start moving again. So the vaccination is going to be key. And this is the current proof of concept. This is a proof of concept. It's being done by Crew Assist. It's being supported by many the large shipping organizations. Probably shipping is the largest ecosystem in the world. You can't onboard everybody overnight. And there are many people trying to do this. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we have this data provenance in there, that a seafarer can come out of a ship, they can go into an airport without getting into contact with the public right now while the pandemic rages, and they'll be able to go on a plane and exchange the crew. Right now, about 500,000 seafarers have been stuck on ships. They've had big problems, obviously mental problems as well if they can't get off, and not to mention the ability that ships may stop working, and 90% of goods goes by sea. We don't want ships quarantined in ports, and then there's of course food security. So it's very important that this gets addressed. And the beauty of this technology is when it works for the seafarers, whoever supplies this solution, there'll be combination, they'll be interacted together, will work of course for everything. So this is what I've been concentrating on with this technology. We're doing Singapore to the Philippines right now in the proof of concept. And so getting the seafarers from the Philippines, because there's more seafarers from the Philippines than anywhere, get them relocated off the ship, back home, quarantine, into hotels, into an airport, and safely exchange them, so either through Singapore or through other ports. So we're hoping that this will, by the end of the year, we will have, this will be a fairly established production.
No, I couldn't agree more, Dave. I mean, this is such a great initiative, and it just, in some ways, it converges through convergence of all these different parameters all together, which we've been talking about pre-COVID, just from a transportation perspective, and looking at, smart city, urban environment. We talked about, air taxis and all the rest of it. And in some ways, this is like a benchmark for other subsectors within the transportation industry in order to build that trust, that verification, and level of safety that the wider population requires to, and governments require as well, before they give the green light to. So this is fantastically relevant, regardless of COVID. I think COVID speeded everything up, but it's kind of like this ecosystem that we've been talking about throughout this presentation that will create models for other sectors to solve their issues as well.
That's right. And you won't always, everyone's going to have local systems, right?
Yeah.
So you can't have one solution. You can have one underlying cybersecurity solution, but you're going to have to interact with all the local systems, track and trace or vaccination systems. But we have created a universal cybersecurity layer and a universal verifier. And then it becomes down to political will and how you talk to the governments, etc. But the train's left the station here, right? So that's the key. Yeah. And then just finally, when we have trusted data and it's granular data in real time, we can improve the insurance experience. Parametric insurance is a way of pre-agreeing a contract to say, if your website is defaced, for example, and you lose we'll pay you $100,000 for the loss, as long as the index that we're using to trigger that payment has been met. So this is a bespoke contract between a corporation and the insurance industry. It's not a replacement for traditional insurance. It's complementary. It's being used for climate change contracts, weather patterns and things like this. And when our supply chain has this data, we'll be able to, in some cases, design parametric insurance for people in the supply chain at the touch points of insurance. And the key point is, if something goes wrong, they'll get a cash payment immediately. There won't be a long drawn out claims process or any legal aspects. The cash will be paid within, say, a week of the trigger being verified. and that gives people cash in hand at the time they need it most. So this is, to me, this is going to be a big change in the insurance world, and I think it benefits the insurer, the customer, and everyone alike. And I think it's a good development.
No, I agree, David. And actually, you just sprung to mind, because also part of the PBEC membership, we obviously have strong insurance representation in AIA and the Insurance Authority in Hong Kong in particular. But there was also things that we were obviously promoting, and it's now implemented, is the online dispute resolution that's been brought in this year during COVID, actually, funny enough, in the summer in Hong Kong, to make it much more easier for SMEs to settle at a much lower cost when there's a dispute. And I think, again, it comes back to the API ability to interact with different platforms to bring all of these things together. And this slide particularly just prompted me to mention the online dispute resolution platform that the government has now endorsed, which is good for, I mean, I think it's one of the first in Asia to speed up the legal side of disputes to settle and obviously get paid out as well eventually.
Yeah, that's right. And it's very similar to a smart contract, right? Which,
yeah, exactly.
It's easily digitized, but the key thing here is that we'll be able to do more of it, and that's very exciting. So finally, conclusions. I mean, you can call it post-COVID, post-pandemic, but I think we're going to see a total reset. We're certainly going to see a reset in government, healthcare, supply chain, and insurance, because none of those have really worked too well together, caught out by the pandemic. Nobody's fault, I think, but we weren't ready. And although, you know, insurance, for example, was offered, no one took it. But everyone's affected. So there needs to be public-private partnerships here, where the government and private industry work together to make sure that we don't get called out again in the future, which would be very embarrassing, given that we've got all this information now. I think there's a move to personal data, like the seafarer having their data. We don't need to be giving data away. It's against the data laws coming in now and everything else. So there's a move to that, and the ability to run analytics on your data. We're going to see much more automated risk management, evidence-based, as I explained, when you outcome-based pricing. Clinical trials, for example, we'll be able to know if a patient has taken their medicine, and if they took their medicine on time and the medicines were in the right temperature and they still were sick, then why should the pharmaceutical industry get paid for that? So it's an outcome-based way of doing things, because we know what's happened and what was true. The digital currencies, of course, are going to start coming in here now, and I think there's many central bank digital currencies in play. I think that's going to be the trade going on, and not Bitcoin or things like that. When you have a central bank digital currency attached to the fiat currency, then trading can be done in digital currency as well. All the data, it'll be more data driven, especially insurance underwriting. And these APIs are going to link everything together. And most importantly, who and what do I trust, which is what this is all about, moving from trust to truth based on verification. So
wonderful.
I think that.
Well, thank you, David. I'm just going to bring us back up here quickly. And actually, you just touched very briefly, because we've got obviously a few members in the cryptocurrency segment. You kind of alluded there that you don't think Bitcoin per se is going to be the way forward, perhaps.
Well, I don't know about. I don't want to upset the Bitcoin people. The actual, Bitcoin uses blockchain as a thing, but what I'm really talking about here is, not about the Libra that Facebook were trying to do, which was creating a central bank digital currency.
Yeah.
That concept, but actually run by there's over 35 experimentations going on now for central bank digital currency, and this is in Switzerland, in China. This is about having a reserve, right? So when you use the digital currency, it changes a reserve in the central bank. Therefore, you've always got a link to the fiat currency back to the digital currency, and then you won't have volatility. Bitcoin and have a lot of volatility, right? You can't have that volatility in finance, in insurance reserving and supply. You need to stabilize that volatility. So I think it's about stabilization and volatility.
Well, thank you, David. It's been absolutely fascinating. I have to say, there's so much information being shared. So we must thank you for being so transparent, the integrity that you show and the trust you give us to share such information. I think these are all themes that we need to be aware of, because going forward, transparency is the key for developing or sorry, adoption of these technologies, and for everybody to buy into it. So obviously we'll leave it there for now. Okay. I want to thank you, David, once again, and I hope it will be not too long before we have you back on again, because I'm sure this is moving faster than we ever thought possible because of COVID. So next year there'll probably be even more things to share, including how your seafarers health pass is going. If that is implemented, that could be a real game changer. So once again, I would, on behalf of the PBEC members and the PBEC board, thank you for doing this today, David. And thank you for those dialing in and listening. When you see this, I hope you also found it, as much as I did, very useful indeed. So we'll stop there. Thank you so much.